This course on justice begins not with abstract theories or complicated definitions, but with a simple story that immediately places us in a difficult moral situation. Imagine you are driving a trolley car, moving uncontrollably fast down a track. Ahead of you, 5 workers are repairing the rails, completely unaware of the danger rushing toward them. You try to stop, but the brakes have failed. You know with absolute certainty that if nothing changes, all 5 people will be killed. Panic sets in and you feel powerless until you notice something important. To your right is a side track, and on that track stands only one worker. Your steering wheel still works. You now face a decision that will determine who lives and who dies. This is not a puzzle about clever thinking or quick reactions. It is a moral dilemma. The question is simple but unsettling. What is the right thing to do? Most people, when first hearing this scenario, instinctively feel that turning the trolley onto the side track is the right choice. The reasoning seems straightforward. Saving 5 lives at the cost of one appears morally preferable. Many would say that allowing 5 people to die when you could prevent it by sacrificing one feels deeply wrong. This way of thinking focuses on outcomes. It asks us to compare results and choose the action that produces the least harm. The emotional weight of 5 deaths versus 1 death feels impossible to ignore. For many, the numbers alone settle the issue. Yet even at this early stage, the question is not as simple as it seems. Are we responsible for the death of the one worker if we actively turn the trolley? Or are we merely choosing the lesser of 2 unavoidable tragedies? These doubts linger beneath the surface, even when the initial answer feels obvious. Some people connect this kind of reasoning to real-world events, where tragic choices must be made under extreme pressure. History offers moments when people are praised for choosing a smaller loss to prevent a larger catastrophe. In such situations, we often celebrate those who act decisively, even when their decisions involve sacrifice. The moral logic behind these judgments seems consistent with the trolley case. Sometimes, terrible outcomes are unavoidable, and the best we can do is minimize the damage. Yet this raises an uncomfortable question. If choosing the lesser evil is acceptable here, does that principle apply everywhere? Or are there limits to what we should be willing to do, no matter how good the outcome appears? Not everyone agrees with turning the trolley. A smaller group argues that deliberately choosing to kill someone, even to save others, is morally dangerous. Some fear that this kind of thinking can justify horrific actions when taken too far. History has shown how arguments about sacrificing individuals for the greater good can be used to excuse mass violence and oppression. From this perspective, refusing to intervene may feel morally cleaner, even if it leads to greater loss of life. This view prioritizes moral restraint over numerical calculation. It suggests that certain actions, like intentionally killing an innocent person, are wrong regardless of the consequences. This disagreement reveals a deep divide in how people think about morality. To test whether our moral instincts are consistent, consider a second version of the trolley problem. This time, you are not the driver. You are standing on a bridge overlooking the track. The trolley is again speeding toward 5 workers, and again the brakes do not work. You cannot stop it. But next to you stands a very large man leaning over the bridge. If you push him onto the track, his body will stop the trolley, saving the 5 workers but killing him. Suddenly, the moral landscape feels different. Most people who were comfortable turning the trolley now recoil at the idea of pushing the man. Even though the outcome, 5 lives saved, 1 life lost, is the same, the action feels far more disturbing. This reaction raises a powerful question. What happened to the principle of saving the greatest number? Why does it feel acceptable to redirect a trolley but not to push a person? One explanation people offer is that pushing someone involves direct physical violence. It feels more personal, more intentional, more like murder. The man on the bridge was not originally part of the danger. By pushing him, you actively involve him in a situation he would have otherwise escaped. This sense of personal responsibility changes how we judge the act, even though the consequences remain identical. Others argue that the difference lies in our role. As the trolley driver, you are already part of the situation. You must act, because doing nothing is itself a decision. As a bystander on the bridge, however, you have the option to remain uninvolved. Choosing to push the man feels like crossing a moral line, stepping into violence rather than responding to an unavoidable threat. Yet critics of this distinction point out that choosing not to act is still a choice, one that allows 5 people to die. The discomfort remains unresolved. Now consider a medical scenario. Imagine you are an emergency room doctor. 6 patients arrive after a terrible accident. 5 have moderate injuries and will survive if treated promptly. 1 is critically injured and will require your full attention all day. If you focus on the 1, the 5 will die. If you treat the 5, the 1 will die. Most people say the doctor should save the 5. Once again, the logic of numbers seems compelling. The doctor is not killing anyone directly. Death occurs because of limited time and resources. This feels different from pushing someone off a bridge. Now imagine a darker medical case. You are a transplant surgeon with 5 patients who will die without organ transplants. There are no donors available. In the next room lies a healthy patient, unconscious after a routine checkup. If you take his organs, he will die, but the 5 others will live. Almost everyone agrees this would be wrong. Even though the outcome is 5 lives saved, the act itself feels horrifying. The healthy patient is innocent, vulnerable, and used purely as a means to an end. This reaction reveals that consequences alone are not enough to guide our moral judgments. These examples reveal 2 powerful ways of thinking about morality. The first focuses on consequences. According to this view, the moral value of an action depends on the results it produces. If an action leads to more happiness or less suffering overall, then it is the right thing to do. This approach is known as consequentialist moral reasoning. It is attractive because it seems practical, logical, and fair. Why wouldn't we want to reduce suffering and increase well-being whenever possible? The second approach focuses not on outcomes, but on the nature of the action itself. Some actions, people believe, are simply wrong, no matter how beneficial the results might be. Killing an innocent person, using someone merely as a tool, or violating basic human rights are seen as morally unacceptable under any circumstances. This is known as categorical moral reasoning. It emphasizes duties, rights, and moral limits that should not be crossed, even in desperate situations. These 2 approaches often come into conflict, and neither is easy to dismiss. Consequentialism can seem cold and calculating, willing to justify almost anything for a good result. Categorical morality can seem rigid, unwilling to prevent great harm because of strict rules. Yet both reflect deeply held human intuitions. This tension lies at the heart of moral and political philosophy. One of the most influential forms of consequentialist thinking is utilitarianism, developed by the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Bentham argued that human beings are governed by pleasure and pain. We seek happiness and avoid suffering. From this observation, he drew a bold conclusion. The right action is the one that maximizes overall happiness. Laws, policies, and personal choices should all aim to produce the greatest good for the greatest number. Utilitarianism has enormous appeal because it treats everyone's happiness as equally important. No one's pleasure counts more simply because of status or power. However, critics argue that utilitarianism can ignore justice and individual rights. If sacrificing one innocent person increases total happiness, does that make it morally acceptable? The trolley and transplant cases suggest that many people instinctively say no. These debates show how philosophy works. We begin with intuitive judgments about specific cases. Then we try to articulate the principles behind those judgments. When a new case challenges our principles, we are forced to reconsider and adjust. This back-and-forth process pushes us toward greater clarity, but rarely toward simple answers. Philosophy unsettles us by questioning what we thought we already knew. This unsettling quality is both the risk and the value of studying moral philosophy. Once familiar ideas become strange, they cannot be unseen. Self-knowledge can feel like a loss of innocence, but it also opens the door to deeper understanding. Moral philosophy is not just about abstract theories. It is about how we live, judge, and justify our choices every day. There is also a political risk. Some argue that philosophy distracts people from practical action. Questioning deeply held beliefs can make us uncertain, hesitant, even cynical. Yet history shows that unexamined beliefs can be far more dangerous. Philosophy challenges conventions, but it also exposes their weaknesses. Faced with unresolved questions, some retreat into skepticism, claiming that morality is purely subjective and beyond reason. But this evasion fails because we live out moral answers every day through our actions. Refusing to think is itself a moral stance. As Kant argued, skepticism may offer rest, but it cannot permanently satisfy the human need for reason. The purpose of studying justice is not to deliver final answers, but to awaken moral reflection. It invites us to examine our assumptions, confront uncomfortable truths, and accept the restlessness of reason. This restlessness is not a flaw, it is what keeps moral thinking alive. In the end, moral philosophy tells a story whose outcome we cannot predict. But we know one thing for certain: the story is about us. Our choices, our values, and our willingness to confront difficult questions shape not only our personal lives, but our shared world. To think seriously about justice is to accept both the risk and the responsibility of understanding ourselves more clearly.